In 1933, 1 in every 4 American workers had no job at all, and eggs cost about 2 cents each. That 2-cent egg was often the only real protein a family could afford to put on the table. But almost nobody talks about what grandmothers actually did with those eggs to keep entire families alive. They turned a single egg into breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dessert, using tricks that have almost vanished today. In the next few minutes, you'll see 50 of those forgotten dishes, built from nothing but eggs and pantry scraps. And by the end, you'll understand why an egg back then was treated like a lifeline, not just food. The Great Depression ran from 1929 into the late 1930, and it destroyed savings, farms, and homes across the country. Rural families usually kept a few chickens, so eggs were sitting right in the backyard, ready and cheap. City families had to buy from the grocer, but even then eggs stayed one of the cheapest proteins around. Feeding a family on almost nothing became a full-time skill, and most of that skill fell on mothers and grandmothers. They leaned on cheap staples like flour, cornmeal, lard, and stale bread to stretch every single egg further. None of this was fancy cooking. It was calculated survival, engineered to deliver the most calories for the least money. The first trick was water-scrambled eggs, and it sounds almost too simple to work. A spoonful of water went into the eggs before scrambling, instead of milk or butter, which many families didn't have. As the eggs cooked, that water turned to steam, puffing the eggs up and making 2 eggs look and feel like 4. It meant a mother could serve a full plate to a hungry child using half the eggs she actually had. The second trick was the hard-fried egg, sometimes called the lace-edged egg because of how it looked in the pan. Eggs were fried in a generous amount of hot lard or bacon grease until the edges turned crispy and golden brown. That extra frying time rendered more fat into the egg itself, adding calories that a thin diet badly needed. A child eating 1 lace-edged egg with grease-soaked bread was getting far more energy than the egg alone provided. Next came the 10-minute boiled egg, cooked exactly that long until the yolk was fully set all the way through. Once peeled, it was stored and eaten cold the next day with just a pinch of salt and a slice of stale bread. That made it the perfect no-fuel meal for a laborer or a child walking off to school with nothing else packed. Cornmeal egg cakes were another staple, built from cornmeal, water, salt, and 1 beaten egg mixed into a thick paste. The egg worked as the binder, holding the cake together without needing milk or wheat flour, which cost more. Fried in hot grease, these cakes became a filling, carbohydrate-heavy meal that could quiet a hungry stomach for hours. Egg gravy came next, made by chopping hard-boiled eggs into a thin gravy of meat drippings, flour, water, and grease. Poured over biscuits, toast, or potatoes, it stretched a small amount of meat flavor across an entire meal for the family. American-style egg drop soup was simpler still, just beaten eggs drizzled into simmering water or thin broth on the stove. The eggs formed soft ribbons that thickened the broth, turning almost nothing into something that actually filled a bowl. Mock omelets skipped cheese and vegetables entirely, using only beaten eggs with a splash of water or milk. Some families stirred in stale breadcrumbs or a sprinkle of flour to give the thin omelet more bulk and structure. Hard-cooked egg salad kept things even leaner, mixing chopped boiled eggs with a little mayonnaise or just vinegar and salt. Here the egg itself was the star of the sandwich, not the dressing, because dressing ingredients cost money too. Egg and potato scramble used up leftover boiled potatoes, diced and fried before eggs were scrambled directly into the pan. The potatoes soaked up the fat and extended the eggs, letting 1 skillet feed more mouths than the eggs alone could. When milk was too scarce for a real custard, families still managed a poverty-stricken egg custard using eggs and a little sugar or molasses. Sometimes stale bread was soaked into that egg mixture before baking, turning it into a bread pudding that felt like dessert. It was a rare moment where a hard week could still end with something that tasted sweet instead of just filling. When wild greens like dandelion were available, families chopped them into scrambled eggs to add vitamins and extra bulk. That single addition turned a plain scrambled egg into something closer to a real vegetable-rich meal for growing children. Even bread got the egg treatment, with a small amount mixed into salt-rising bread dough to boost its nutrition. It was a quiet trick for making an everyday loaf slightly richer, without spending a single extra cent on new ingredients. 12 techniques, 1 ingredient, and each one solving the same problem: how to make an egg feed more people than it should. This kind of skill was not seen as poverty back then. It was seen as pride, a mark of a truly capable homemaker. Millions of American households kept backyard chickens during this period, turning a small yard into a form of food security. The U.S. Department of Agriculture actively promoted poultry and egg production as a real strategy for improving family nutrition. By 1930, egg production had become a meaningful part of the entire agricultural economy, even as farming faced its own crisis. A woman who could stretch a handful of eggs into a week of meals was respected the way a skilled tradesperson would be today. That respect came from necessity, because losing that skill in a bad month could mean a family going hungry. After World War II, boxed cereals, frozen dinners, and powdered milk flooded the market, marketed as modern and convenient. Suddenly, the old egg-stretching techniques looked outdated, tied to a hardship era that families wanted to forget as fast as possible. As households grew more affluent and two incomes became common, nobody had the time or the need to cook this way anymore. The grandmothers who lived through the Depression often watched their own children turn away from these recipes toward shiny new convenience foods. Knowledge that once kept entire families alive slowly disappeared from kitchens within a single generation. Today, most of these 50 dishes exist only in old handwritten recipe cards or the memories of people now in their 90s. What you just saw is not a list of recipes. It is a record of how ordinary people survived on almost nothing. And that same resourcefulness shows up again and again throughout history, whenever people are pushed to their absolute limit. If you want to see what people did when they had even less than this, the next video breaks down exactly that. Go watch it now, because the ingenuity in that story is even harder to believe than the eggs you just heard about.